All right, so let's think about for just a second sort of the fundamental problem that we're trying to solve when we're squatting, all right? And this is aside from like the actual objective of getting stronger, right? So, I think everybody's here agreeing that getting strong is important. Squatting, deadlifting are gonna be kind of your most potent stresses in terms of applying a force production stress to your body and therefore making you stronger. So, let's just move all that aside. So the next question is, if squatting is going to be one of the movements that are involved, one of the fundamental movements that are going to be involved in strength training, how do we optimize the squat so that we get the most potent stress and then all the other benefits of squatting that come along with squatting in a particular way, right? So if there's a way that we can lift the most weight possible, reduce potential wear and tear on your knees, and dose yourself with as much force production stress as possible, that's the way we're gonna do it, all right? So the truth is, guys, that it doesn't really matter. Like, you're gonna get strong if you squat, no matter like where you put the bar on your back and how you execute the squat. Like, a lot of people have gotten strong squatting without doing starting strength. That like, to starting strength fans, that might seem like a foreign concept. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, people have gotten really strong. Maybe not that long, but for hundreds of years, people have gotten really strong squatting just however the hell they want, right? Put the bar on your back, squat down, more weight, more weight, more weight, right? So if you're sharp, you may be asking yourself, why would I care about all these particular pieces and doing it an exact technical way? Why does it matter? And I think that's a valid question. So I'm gonna try to answer that for you today. Number one, when you, and this is probably the biggest factor in terms of coaching and moving under the bar. All right, so let's think about this for a second. When you, ever since you were a tiny little child, when you were a baby and you started standing up, all the way up until the point that you put a barbell on your back and you start squatting with a load on your back. Every time you've stood up from a squatted position, what's been your objective in that moment? It's really simple. Your objective's been to get upright, all right? And that's a perfectly fine objective because that makes sense, right? You're trying to stand up. So when you go from a bent hips and knees position, whether you're squatting down or you're sitting on a chair, getting up from the toilet, just think about what that movement looks like when you stand up, right? It just looks like standing up, right? So your hips are extending, your knees are extending, and your back angle, right? So when I do this, this is your back angle. Your back angle is doing this as quickly as possible, right? Because again, that just makes sense. It doesn't make any sense for you to stand up like this and then take a few steps and then get upright, right? People do that when their backs hurt, but they don't typically do that under normal circumstances. You guys all understand what I'm getting at here? So the point is that anytime you're learning a movement, you have a default programmed into your central nervous system, right? Your brain and your spinal cord and your motor units. You have a default way of doing that, of executing that movement that is the product of either training or just habit, right? And in this case, it's habit because nobody has taught you to squat a different way, all right? Not right or wrong, I'm just saying that's what you have programmed. And how many reps of getting upright from a squatting position do you have in your life? Millions, right? Like a lot. So it makes sense that when you put the bar on your back, you're gonna try to get upright as quickly as possible. All right, now we have a problem because by putting the bar on your back, once you bend your hips and your knees, you are no longer a system that's independent of anything else, meaning that like Kristen's body weight and her center of mass now is being disturbed by a load that's sitting on top of her shoulders. Okay, so the center of mass situation is a little bit different. Okay, depending on how heavy the weight is, her center of mass with the barbell on her back may be moving up pretty high, right? So it changes the mechanics a little bit in terms, or not a little bit. It changes the mechanics significantly in terms of balance and how she should be moving with that load on her back. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, because the bar is up here on your shoulders, your back angle, your knee position, your depth, all these things are variables that you have a choice. You have a choice in executing on the way down and on the way up. All right, now on the way up, it's more limited, and you're gonna see that if you come to the seminar, we show you videos of this. On the way up, it's a little bit more limited because your body will try to figure out the optimal way to move that load. All right, but on the way down, you can basically put your knees wherever your flexibility and your experience will allow you to put them. You can get in a back angle that's going to be determined by your preferences or just how your body wants to move by default. Okay. The problem with that is that once the weight gets heavy enough, there's only one way that the load is going to come up. All right. And that's by using the hips. So what's going to happen is if you go into the bottom of the squat in a position that's suboptimal in terms of moving a heavy load, your body will arrange itself at some point between the down and the up in order to access the structures of your body that are going to allow you to lift heavy weight, all right? And that's where the hip drive thing comes from, right? So you can put the bar up on the top of your back, you can put it in a low bar position, you can put it in a front squat position, and you will hip drive in all those instances if the weight is heavy enough, okay? So there's a problem there because if you're just squatting however you want, you're getting into the bottom of the squat and then there's a bunch of extraneous, unnecessary movement coming out of the bottom that results in either just wasted energy or for most of us in the room, really everybody except Haley, it's wear and tear that we don't need, right? And she doesn't need it either, right? But everybody who starts this after like the age of 35, you don't need to be beating the shit out of your knees every time you train, because what we're doing is the same movements over and over again, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever it is, with 5 more pounds, 5 more pounds, 5 more pounds, 5 more pounds, right? And that's a recipe for some problems down the road if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, okay? So there's 2 things worth considering here. The most important is efficiency, and efficiency in terms of how much weight we can move. So if there's extra movement at the bottom of the squat, if your butt goes from here to here, and then the bar starts going up, it means that you have expended some energy to rearrange your body before the weight has come up, all right? Do you see how that is a system that's not efficient, right? And it does translate into less weight on the bar. Or if you're good at squatting, it translates into a sticking point about halfway up. And if you're really good at squatting, you learn to grind through that sticking point, and you get really good at it. Like I would argue that really good squatters are just really good at grinding through sticking points. You don't have to have a sticking point. If you do it correctly, there's no sticking point. You're like a forklift. You go like this and you go like this. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't slow down and it doesn't feel like shit, but objectively, when you watch it, there is no sticking point if you do it efficiently, all right? And it comes down to maintaining access to the hips, all right? So that's thing number 1, efficiency. The second part of it, and it's kind of a byproduct of efficiency, is quote unquote safety or just like less wear and tear, right? So I again argue that if you're moving efficiently, if you're putting yourself in the right position, there's little asymmetrical loading, there's little dynamic loading at the bottom of the squat. That's all beneficial in terms of keeping us training for as long as we want or need to train, all right? Are we all on track, guys? All right. So that's why it's important. So when somebody is thinking or asking or saying it doesn't really matter how you squat, you're going to get strong either way. That's true. That is correct. All right. You're going to get stronger faster doing it efficiently with less wear and tear on your joints. And I think that's a very valid argument to make. And then the kind of a third thing there is if you have no objective measure of what efficient is, things can get pretty silly. Right? So like if you can all agree on a first principles, like a fundamentally principally based method of doing something, at least you have a guidepost or a guideline to follow where you don't stray too much into silliness from there. Okay.